Sir Bernard Eder. He is an international judge at the International Commercial Court in Singapore. Apart from that, as many of you will know, he sat as a High Court judge in England and Wales for a number of years. And before that was an extremely distinguished SICC at the commercial bar. He has over 300 arbitrations under his belt, which I simply don't know how he managed to get through all of those. Sir Bernard, over to you.
Good morning, everybody. I hope everyone can hear. Thank you, Oba. I'm actually sitting in London at my home because of COVID. But behind me, you will see the Supreme Court in Singapore. And as Oba said, I am an international judge at the Singapore International Commercial Court. I'm also an arbitrator. But so far as the court is concerned, even before COVID, I think it led the way in terms of court virtual hearings. In 2019, even before COVID, there were some 25 hearings in the International Court in Singapore that were conducted by way of a virtual hearing. And given it is an international court, we often have hearings where 3 judges will be sitting at first instance. So I did a case with a judge in Singapore, a judge in Australia, and I was the 3rd judge. And we were participating in this hearing, hearing witnesses, hearing submissions over a number of days through a virtual hearing. So as I say, Singapore has, I think, led the way, and that will certainly, as Oba said, continue. It has continued during COVID. So I am just about to start in 2 weeks' time a 10-day witness trial in Singapore, sitting in London using, I think it will be Zoom. I'll come to that in a minute. Equally, I should say in arbitration, I know this webinar is not really about arbitration, but virtually all hearings since the beginning of the year, since COVID took effect, have been conducted by arbitration, by video. So I was doing a hearing 2 weeks ago where an English barrister sitting in London was cross-examining a witness in China through an interpreter sitting in Singapore, and other participants flung around the world. There was something like 40, and it worked perfectly well. And if you think about, if we hadn't done that, it was supposed to take place in Singapore. If we'd all had to go to Singapore, the additional time and expense would have been very much greater. So that is the background. There are practical difficulties so far as virtual hearings are concerned. So, for example, time zones and different witnesses may be in different places, and one has to bear that in mind. But there are a number of matters that I would like to emphasize right at the beginning. The first is legality. A number of 2 main questions arise so far as the legality, the international law position, with regard to sittings by way of a virtual hearing. The first is the position of the judge. So I am sitting in Singapore, in London, sitting as a judge in the International Court in Singapore, and the question arises as to whether that is constitutional, both as a matter of Singapore law and as a matter of English law. I don't want to go into the details of that, but that needs to be considered rather carefully. The second question is the legality with regard to witnesses. Now, surprisingly, perhaps, I have been told only in the past few days that certain countries will not allow, I mean it is illegal according to the local law, for witnesses to give evidence by video to a foreign court from within their state, the territory of their state. And I have been told that that is the case, either is or may be the case anyway, and the position is uncertain, with regard to a number of European countries and a number of other countries around the world. So if you are thinking about a virtual hearing, you should satisfy yourselves that it is a legal hearing. It may affect enforceability at the end of the day. The second main topic I wanted to raise was choice of platform. Now, some of you may know this. There are a number of individual companies that offer platforms. So Zoom is the big one at the moment. There is Blue Jeans. There is something called Skype for Business. There is Microsoft Teams, and there is Google. They are all to a large extent similar. They have similar, some are better than others. Be careful about security. So I was doing a hearing about 4 weeks ago. In the middle of the hearing, it was a blue jeans hearing, a lady appeared on screen in the middle of a witness giving evidence and said, "Hello." She had absolutely nothing to do with the case and had somehow managed to breach security and parachuted into the hearing. I didn't know who she was. I was chairing the hearing, and I managed to persuade her to go away in the nicest way possible. But be careful about security. If you do a virtual hearing, my own very strong view is you should have a host, a professional host, to conduct all the technical side. And here we're very grateful for OBA has organised this, Simon Gore and Sean Callum, I think, who've been helping on this, and I think that is absolutely essential. The third thing I wanted to mention is a protocol for the virtual hearing. Now, over the past few months, what has happened in London is that as cases develop, these protocols have expanded. And the last hearing I did last week, there was a protocol of 10 pages setting out in particular detail the, I'm not sure, rules that were to be applied to the virtual hearing. And it extended, for example, to what the witness has to say. When the witness first gives evidence, he has to confirm certain things. So, for example, he's on his own in the room. He has no documents available because you will not be able to see that particular witness during the hearing. So those are matters of very considerable importance. Anyone wants a protocol for the hearing or a draft, they can contact, I think, OBA or me afterwards, and I'm sure that somehow or other we will be able to circulate to you a draft virtual hearing protocol. It's a bit of plagiarism. Everyone has been stealing everyone else's ideas of what to put in this protocol, but it's important that it should be agreed. So those are the really important things that I wanted to emphasize. In terms of personal experience for me, I think it has been a huge success. Other speakers who will be coming in a moment will give you some tips on advocacy and practical ways of dealing with a hearing, which are really, really important. For example, dress. I did a hearing last week where everyone started off, at least the men were all wearing a shirt and a tie and a jacket. It was very hot in London. On the second day, ties seemed to have disappeared. On the third day, jackets disappeared. And on the fourth day, sleeves were rolled up. And I thought that the fifth day, this didn't happen, but I thought on the fifth day, people would arrive in T-shirts and swimming gear. In fact, that didn't happen. It rained yesterday, so we were all right in the end. It was back to jackets. But I say rules as to the dress and how you proceed. Again, other people will talk about advocacy. The two things I would say are these. First of all, in order for a virtual hearing to be successful, it has to be well organized. Organization is everything, both in terms of internet connectivity of people around the world, and in terms of the order of witnesses and how things work. That is really, really important. And again, other people will talk about it. The last thing I wanted to mention, and I'll pass on to others, and that is advocacy. Being an advocate in a virtual hearing is different from being an advocate in court. Other people will speak about this, but it is tremendously important, and different people have different ways of dealing with this. Referring to documents, for example, in the course of a hearing is very, very difficult. So, for example, I received yesterday for my case in the SICC, in the International Commercial Court in Singapore, which is starting in 2 weeks' time. I hope you will see this USB. On that USB is a full electronic hearing bundle. I say hearing bundle there are something like 50,000 documents on this USB. They have all been page numbered and sorted. And as we will go through the hearing, the organizer of the virtual hearing will be able to put up on screen the documents on this USB. But organization is absolutely everything. And that's why certainly in Singapore, it is unbelievably efficient. And if the hearing is not efficiently conducted, problems will occur. In terms of advocacy, the one thing I have found, and I'll leave it for other speakers and I'll end on this note, and that is my own experience, is that advocacy is much shorter. It is difficult to be a long, boring, inefficient advocate in a virtual hearing. So in a way, I think virtual hearings will make things cheaper. People won't have to fly around the world. It'll make things faster. You can have hearings virtually within a very short notice. You can have a hearing just this evening. It doesn't mean that people have to travel in order to come to a hearing. So I am very much a strong advocate in favor of virtual hearings, provided, of course, they are dealt with efficiently. And with that word, I pass on back to Oba. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sir Bernard. Thank you very much for that. Then maybe time for one more question, which I'm going to ask the judges to answer. How do you read the room when you're having a virtual hearing or a remote hearing? Because of course you don't have the same 360 view as you do in a live hearing. So how do you read the room? How do you read reactions? Bernard, what do you think about that? Well, how do you read the room?
Well, you say read the room. I think it's much more important for the advocate to read the judge than for the judge to read the room. And I think that is a problem. But widening the question, if I may, I do think I'm very much in favor of remote hearings. But I think certainly at the appellate level, but even at first instance, I think there is a real problem in terms of conducting the hearing, particularly when you get to submissions. Certainly when I get to submissions, I'm quite an interactive judge. I will have read the submissions, any final written submissions, and I would like to press counsel on certain points. And that is quite difficult, I think, to do in a remote hearing. There is a much greater tendency, simply because of the technology, to let counsel argue the case without interruption. Whereas certainly when I used to be counsel in the Court of Appeal in England, you would often have 3 judges, I'm not sure shouting at you, but pressing you for answers. And I think that is quite difficult to do. So when you say read the room, I think that is one of the big problems.
Yes. Yes.
There's less interaction in a remote hearing. And I think that is the one big disadvantage of a remote hearing.
Yes. And more difficult to establish a relationship, either with the judge or with the witness. But I think
anyone, can I just interrupt you, Oba? For example, anyone who saw the Brexit hearing in the Supreme Court, where you have, I think, 9 judges or 11 judges and counsel on their feet, it was like a seminar where the different judges would be shooting questions at counsel and in asking or needing a reply. Now, that in a remote hearing is very, very difficult to do properly.
Yes.
Because people will overspeak and there is a little time lag, as Anna said. Yes. And I think that is the real problem in terms of reading the room.
Thank you very much, Bernard.